Our wisdom story this morning is one of my kids' favorite stories. It's called The Bad Seed. I'm not actually going to try and read the whole book to you. It's written by Jory John, and then there's illustrations by Pete Oswald. But I am going to try and tell you sort of my own version of it this morning, with maybe one exception of one page that was particularly well written. So if you can see, because it's kind of big, this is a bad seed. And so he knows this in part because he understands himself to be a bad seed. But just because he's a bad seed doesn't mean that he doesn't have good hearing. And so as he walks around, he does hear all the other seeds. You can see some of the other seeds, maybe some of you, some of the other seeds pointing at him and saying, this is a bad seed. And so he hears the people talking, the other seeds talking about him, saying that he's a bad seed. And so the question is, how bad of a seed is he? And here's the part that I'm going to read because it's great. He is so bad because he never puts things back where they belong. He's late to everything. He tells long jokes with no punchline. He never washes his hands or his feet. He lies about pointless stuff. He cuts in line every time. He stares at everybody and glares at everybody. And he finishes other people's sentences. Oh, and he never listens. And you know why he does lots of other bad things too, in addition to all of those things? Because he's a bad seed. But the thing that the bad seed wants you to also know is that he wasn't always like this. In fact, he grew up in a sunflower with a whole seed family. And they did all sorts of fun things together, and they played games, and they told jokes, and they had a good time. And he didn't start out as a bad seed. But then the petals drooped, and the sunflower seeds all fell out, and they were harvested. And then he was stuck in a dark bag, and he didn't know what was going on. And then all of a sudden, the bag opened, and there was sunlight, and a hand reached in and grabbed a whole bunch of him and his siblings and stuffed the seeds in his mouth. And he thought he was done for. But then at the last moment, something happened, and he was spit out and landed on a wad of gum. And that was a moment where things changed for him. And so he went off and lived on his own, and he made bad choices on his own too. He didn't need other people to be around to do bad things. And he struggled, and then he found his way back into society and did bad things, and was the bad seed that we've all come to know and maybe not love so much. But the story ends with the bad seed wanting us to know something. He wants us to know that he has made a choice. He has decided that he wants to be happy. And so he is trying really hard to do some good things. He holds the door open for other seeds once in a while. And he picks up some trash that he sees and throws it out. And he does these nice things. Now, he still does some bad things too. He doesn't change all together all at once. But he wants us to know that he's no longer just a bad seed anymore, and that it is possible for us to change. And so here ends our story, our wisdom story for this morning. And I believe now it is time to sing the children out. Who is leading that? It's not me. So we have two readings this morning. Is that on? There we go. Two readings this morning. And the first one is actually more of a story, and it's in some ways a continuation of the story we just heard, but a story really that's for grown-ups. It's the story of a man that I met named Tony. And Tony is someone who was formerly incarcerated. And with permission, I'm sharing a little bit of Tony's story now as it was shared with me and others present at a conference I was attending. So Tony was incarcerated when he was 17. I don't actually remember whether he actually killed someone or just tried to kill someone, but it was serious. He was in prison for a reason. And what Tony wanted the folks at the conference I was attending to know was how he got there. And so this was his story. His story was that he grew up in a home with a parent who was addicted to drugs. And this was the primary focus of his parents' life. And so he and his brother really had to scrape by as best they could, mostly on their own, looking out for each other. And they did, but life was hard because sometimes the folks who did drugs with their parent, their lone parent, their single parent, would come over, and they did drugs in the house. And sometimes these folks would gather him in it, they would make a circle, and they would put him and his brother in the middle and instruct them and make them fight until one of them was too injured to continue. This was not a one-time occurrence. This was a semi-frequent occurrence. I could give you more details, but I think you get the idea of the kind of family, the kind of home setting that Tony grew up in. And so it's probably not a huge surprise that he was, perhaps we might consider, a bad seed and made some bad choices as a teenager. But what Tony shared was that prison for him was actually a good thing because he went to a Quaker service in prison. And the Quaker service in prison was the first time in his life that he could recall that someone was kind to him at age 17. And he experienced that kindness, and he said, I want more of this. And he worked really hard, and he figured out a different way to be in the world. And after he was released, he worked hard to help other folks avoid the path that he was on and to help folks who were incarcerated find their way to a better life. So that's Tony's story. And then our second reading this morning, if you're here last week, is familiar to you. It's applicable this morning as well. And it's ascribed to the ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. Here ends our readings.
My soul is the my soul is the river. My soul is the river. Why do you worry
Much of humanity has considered punishment an ethical tool in our toolbox for centuries, if not millennia. Rulers and governments have punished members of their countries for breaking laws as a way of trying to create justice. In patriarchal societies, men have punished people under their control, family or otherwise, who have done things the patriarch doesn't like. People of all gender identities have punished their children to try to manage their behavior. We have accepted punishment as a normal thing to do, even the right and appropriate thing to do, often without taking much time to evaluate it as a tool. Punishment as normal, punishment as an appropriate ethical tool. This is one of the great lies humankind has told ourselves over the ages, a lie that continues unabated to this day. Typically, there are two main reasons we want to punish people. One reason is the eye for an eye principle. If you hurt me, I hurt you back. What an eye for an eye really means, though, is that you hurt me, which means that I'm hurting. And now I want to hurt you so that you're hurting too. Put more simply, an eye for an eye on an emotional level means you hurt me. If I hurt you back, then I'll hurt less. Now, people don't say that. What they say is, if I hurt you back, then I'll feel better. But what they really mean is, I'll hurt less. People want to punish the person who caused them harm so that they feel less hurt. The second main reason we typically punish is that we want people to understand that what they did was wrong, and we want them to change their behavior and not do that anymore. Those people that we try to punish include ourselves. We often punish ourselves when we make mistakes in hopes of avoiding the same mistake in the future. We punish children so that they change their behavior. We punish people who commit crimes so that they stop committing crimes. Before we get all the way into the criminal justice system, though, let's begin where peace must begin, with peace in our hearts. Don't raise your hand, but I'm curious, how many of us present this morning punish ourselves? And I don't mean physical self-flagellation. I hope most of us don't keep a whip at home to hurt ourselves when we make a mistake. But how many of you, how many of us, punish ourselves emotionally when we screw up or make a mistake? Any perfectionists out there? I'm one right here. How many of us beat ourselves up internally, tell ourselves how stupid we are, what a moron we are far worse on the inside after we make a mistake? I'll admit that I do this more often than I would like. What are we trying to accomplish, though, when we do this to ourselves, when we beat ourselves up, when we punish ourselves? Generally, it's the change the behavior reason. We're hoping that if we're hard enough on ourselves, that the next time we'll be better or smarter or more capable and not make the mistake. Recognize perfectionism, anyone? There's two problems, at least two problems, with this approach. The first is that we're human, and so there's nothing we can do to change the fact that we are going to make more mistakes. It's just part of how it is. The second is that when we punish ourselves, we usually end up causing ourselves to feel more and more shame, to feel more and more like there's something wrong with us as a human being, instead of being able to recognize that we made a mistake, to learn from it, and let it go, all while maintaining a positive sense of self. Hopefully, instead of punishing ourselves, I screwed up, what an idiot, we can coach ourselves with love. Ah, man, I screwed up again. Well, that happens, and it's going to happen again at some point. I'll try to make sure it doesn't happen in this specific way if I can. Often, though, instead of being gentle with ourselves, we're judgmental, and we punish ourselves and aren't very nice about it. Taking the steps outwards, right, the next level, many of us also punish other people. Kids, for example. Does that maybe feel like something of a U-turn for some of you? Like maybe punishing kids is a different kind of punishment, since punishing kids is as a socially acceptable way of parenting in our culture? Punishment has been a go-to parenting tool in many cultures for centuries. Fortunately, in our country, punishing kids with physical violence is quickly becoming socially unacceptable, if it's not already. My hope is that nonviolent punishment follows suit. It may take some time, though, because punishment as a way of being is strongly ingrained in our culture. When we are harmed, it has become a natural instinct for many of us to want to punish the person who did the harm. When someone we care about is harmed, often we naturally want to, because of the culture we live in, we want to see those folks punished. Now, I grew up in this culture, as many of you did, and so it's often my natural instinct. When one of my kids does something that really upsets me, those moments when I really lose my cool, my blood pressure is up and I'm mad, wow, do I really have the urge to punish them sometimes? Now, I mostly manage to avoid punishing them, taking privileges away, taking treats away, because I don't believe in it. But the urge is powerful and strong, because this is what we do in our culture when harm happens. We seek to punish the offending party. We do it with our kids, and we do it with each other. I've punished grown-ups in my life as well, not by taking away their dessert, of course, but punish them nonetheless. We'll get to the grown-ups in a minute, though. We'll start with kids and parents. Beyond our cultural programming, one of the things that makes punishment such a seductive tool for parents is that it's usually quite effective in the short term, and the harmful side effects don't usually show up until later. Punishment does cause long-term damage, though, as punishing kids often causes them to make choices from a fear-based place. Punishment doesn't help kids learn to do the right things for the right reasons. Punishment often leads to feelings of shame, feelings of I am wrong instead of I did something wrong. And it leads to fear-based compliance. Is that really how we want our kids to be living in the world, from fear-based compliance? Punishment does not help kids continue to make good and right and safe choices for themselves as they start to become more and more autonomous. As kids grow into teenagers, they do more and more on their own, and their parents become naturally less present in their day-to-day lives. When parental presence diminishes, when the source of some of the fear-based clients diminishes, what are kids left with when they're more on their own? Have we taught them to make good choices for themselves? What does a 3-year-old learn when a promised trip to get ice cream is taken away because the 3-year-old is acting out at the grocery store? They learn, because I made a mistake, I was punished. Because I made a mistake, I don't deserve ice cream. Because I made a mistake, I am less than. What if, instead of taking away a promised trip to the ice cream store because the 3-year-old acts out at the grocery store, instead the need was met by turning shopping into a game and helping the 3-year-old not be bored? What if, instead of taking away TV time because an 8-year-old is having a hard time cleaning their room, you ask some questions and the 8-year-old is given a snack because hunger was the real problem? What if, instead of taking away a teenager's phone, instead the need for connection was met by spending more quality time with them or helping arrange more time with their friends to help them get the connection that they're looking for? What if, instead of parents punishing their children, which can lead to living from a place of fear and shame, what if we parents and all parents tried to help our children meet the needs they are having and help them find alternative ways to respond? Hold on to that thought, because we're going to come back to it. Instead of punishing and causing fear and shame, instead we try to meet the need the child is having and help them find better ways to respond. A quick side note to parents: if you're listening to this and want to learn more about alternatives to punishment, try Googling either or both of attachment parenting or positive parenting. And I'm also happy to talk to anyone who would be interested directly one-on-one if you'd like. Moving on to our friends and family, adults, the adults in our lives and our families. We most certainly punish each other sometimes. Sometimes this happens physically, more often emotionally. This maybe happens in romantic relationships more often than in friendships, but people certainly punish other folks in their lives who hurt them. We punish in different ways, but punish we do. We may punish by withdrawing emotionally or not doing something that's important to the other person. We may punish by withholding sex or sometimes by saying hurtful things. There are all kinds of ways we emotionally punish others. Again, why? Why is this our choice of how to handle being hurt? Because we want to hurt them and we want them to be hurting the way we are hurting. We want to stop them doing what they are doing, or all of the above. But the thing is, hurting someone else doesn't make our own pain go away. Only forgiveness can do that. And hurting another grown-up is often an ineffective tool at trying to change their behavior. Have you ever tried to control another grown-up? Does it work well? Trying to control another person's behavior through fear, pain, and shame, whether that person is a child or a grown-up, it causes harm. I'll say it again because it's worth saying again. This is not something to feel more shame about if you are aware that you're doing it yourself. It's something to think about seeing if you want to change. Those of us brought up in this country have experienced strong cultural training that has taught us to respond to harm with the desire to punish. I have punished adults in my life when they have harmed me, usually friends and family. It was, in fact, sadly, one of my main coping skills as a young adult. This can be a difficult pattern to overcome, and yet work on it we must, because our cultural propensity towards punishment shows up in all the areas of our lives. As we move out of the family and into our communities, into our cities and our states, the same patterns hold true. If someone commits a crime against me or someone I care about, punishing them isn't going to make what happened go away. Taken to the extreme, punishment isn't going to bring back a murdered daughter, husband, or parent back to life. Punishment isn't going to make the pain of that loss, of the loss of our loved one, go away. Punishment doesn't make our own hurt lessen, whatever that hurt is. It might feel a little better, perhaps, for a moment, if we are hurting so much ourselves to see the other person punished. But it doesn't make the pain of what happened go away. The only real path to healing is forgiveness. And that, too, is a whole nother sermon for another time. Though with this one, I can tell you that that time will be approximately a month from now on Sunday, December 11th. The super short version of the sermon on forgiveness, though, is that pain, the fear, and even the trauma inside us usually only actually dissolve and go away through our own inner work of healing and recovery. As much as punishing the perpetrator might make us feel good in the moment, it doesn't usually bring us healing. Statements like, "I'm so glad the person who attacked my son, daughter, wife, brother is in jail," usually translate to, "I'm still hurting, and I'm glad they're hurting now too." The other question is in our cities, states, in our country is, does punishment, most often in the form of incarceration, does that actually stop people from making bad choices again? The answer in the United States, at least, is a flat-out no. As World Population Review writes, recidivism is the tendency of a convicted criminal to repeat or reoffend a crime after already receiving punishment or serving their sentence. The United States has some of the highest recidivism rates in the world. According to the National Institute of Justice, almost 44% of criminals released return before the first year out of prison. Almost 44% of criminals released return before their first year is complete out of prison. In 2005, about 68% of 405,000 released prisoners were arrested for a new crime within 3 years, and 77% were arrested within 5 years. So no, incarceration, placing people in jail, generally does not help people learn to make better choices. What does our justice system do then? And really, given that by justice we mean punishment, the question is, what does our punishment system actually accomplish? Here's what it accomplishes, written in the words of someone who has lived in it. This poem was written by inmate David Boyd, shared with me while I was volunteering at MCI Norfolk in August of 2004. David wrote, "I exist, but I am not seen. I am alive, but I do not live. I hunger, but I do not feast. I speak, but I am not heard. I seek, but I do not find. I hurt, but I am numb. I cry, but I make no sound. I sleep, but I do not rest. I dream, but I do not hope. I am strong, but I have no strength. I am surrounded by many, but I am alone. I am counted, but I do not count. I am a convict, and I no longer matter." Friends, This is what our punishment system teaches people who have made bad choices in their lives. It teaches them that they are less than human. This is no accident. Language is a powerful tool, and just like in immigration work where we resist language like a legal alien in favor of undocumented person, so too in prison work do we resist inmate and prisoner in favor of incarcerated person. Because the words we use outside reflect what's happening inside prison walls. Inside, you're not David, you're inmate 52793. The urgent questions we must ask ourselves as we consider the validity of punishment as a tool in all aspects of our lives is the same. Instead of punishing people, which is ineffective in meeting our two main goals of punishment, what if instead, like with parents and children, what if instead we tried to meet people's needs and help them find other ways to respond? What would the world look like if instead of punishing people who are addicted to drugs, we sent them to rehab? What would it look like if instead of punishing people who turn to drug dealing to make ends meet, we created an economic system where people were paid better than living wages for work and jobs that were readily available? What if we provided free health care to everyone who was struggling with mental illness instead of arresting them when their illness caused them to act out? What if we provided homes, real homes, apartments, or otherwise, to everyone who needed them, instead of making it illegal to sleep on park benches? What if we provided social workers to people experiencing domestic disputes, instead of asking police to serve in roles for which they are not trained? What if we just fed the people who were hungry? What if we helped people meet the needs they have and help them learn other ways to respond instead of punishing them for their bad choices? We are living in the same world as parents. Punishment may seem like it works in the short term. The person who did the bad thing is behind bars, but it doesn't work. Not for the person who's being punished, and not for us as a society in the long term. There is a better way, and punishment is not it. What a great lie we have been told, what we have been sold over centuries, over millennia. Punishment is justice. Punishment is the answer. Punishment will keep us safe. Punishment will make us feel better. It does not. It does not. It does not. It does not. It is time to say farewell to one of the great lies of human existence, that punishment is justice, that punishment is morally and ethically acceptable. I am not saying that we don't need to hold people accountable. 100% we do. We need to hold people accountable for their actions. And there is a world of difference between accountability and punishment. A world of difference between punishment and trying to help people meet their needs and learn different ways of being in the world. And we haven't even touched on the myriad of ways in which our punishment system is used as a tool of oppression and disproportionately punishes people of color. That's a whole nother sermon series, a horrifying one. This broken tool we misuse for everyone, doubly misused to oppress those already impacted by racism in so many other ways. It needs to change. My friends, there are other systems out there. Restorative justice is one that would be far better. There are so many places that punishment exists, though, accepted as normal and moral and ethical, when it plain and simple is not. Our justice system is one of the most prominent examples, a place very much worthy of our social justice efforts. We tend to find punishment acceptable there, though, because we find it acceptable in so many other places in our lives. Our punitive justice system must go. So too must punishment as an acceptable tool in our culture. We deserve better. The people in our lives deserve better. The people in our communities deserve better. The people in our prisons deserve better. You deserve better.